In the ecclesiastical archives of Eastern Europe, there are references to a document that can no longer be consulted. It was not burned, it was not declared false, it was not sealed in a secret collection. It is simply no longer there. The document referred to an incident that took place in a remote monastery at the end of the 19th century. About that incident, no complete official account survives. Only traces. In the late 1800s, in a mountainous region of Eastern Europe, there stood a small, isolated monastery. It was not a pilgrimage site. It was not known for miracles. It did not appear in the writings of the time. Its purpose was simple: prayer, silence, isolation. A handful of monks, one presiding priest, a small village several kilometers away. For the local community, the monastery was a constant, a place that did not change. Until one winter. The priest of the monastery was known as a balanced man, not fanatical, not eccentric. He had a reputation for discipline and restraint. Services followed a strict order. Rules were observed. There are no records of conflict, no complaints, no prior warnings. He was exactly the kind of man who never appeared in reports. And yet, his name is mentioned in a document that can no longer be read. The earliest references do not describe a clear event. There is no precise moment recorded, only vague formulations. Inappropriate conduct, deviations from established order, the need for evaluation. There is no mention of violence, no mention of heresy, no mention of possession, only of a change. The monks left no personal testimonies, no diaries, no letters. In the registers, only consequences appear. Temporary suspension of services, restricted access, an order of complete isolation, without any explanation. There are clear indications that a report was written, an official document sent to higher authority. It was not rumor. It was not oral tradition. It was an administrative act. In the years that followed, references appear to be the aforementioned document, the monastery case, the incident already reviewed, but the content is missing. The pages where it should be are not torn. They are not burned. The numbering simply skips. Shortly after, the monastery was reorganized. Some monks were transferred. Others disappeared from the records. The priest never appears again in any official role. Not reassigned, not sanctioned, simply absent. For the institution, the matter seems closed. For the archives, incomplete. For the village, something else begins. The villagers did not speak of documents, nor of reports. They spoke of nights without services, of bells that no longer rang, of prayers that stopped mid-verse. They said the monastery went quiet before anyone was officially told to stay away. Lights were seen at hours when no vigil was scheduled. Candles burned in windows that were usually dark, and on certain nights, no sound came from inside at all. Not chanting, not footsteps, not even the wind. The older villagers spoke more carefully. They said the monks had begun to avoid one another, that meals were taken separately, that doors were kept closed longer than necessary. And then there were the rules. Some rules were never written, but everyone seemed to know them. Do not approach the monastery after sunset. Do not answer if you hear your name called from the hill. Do not bring children near the walls during winter. When asked why, the answer was always the same. That is not our place anymore. They also spoke of something older than the monastery, a practice that existed before stone walls and icons. Not a prayer, not a blessing. Something used only when order could not be restored, when silence itself had become unstable. They never named it directly. They never described its steps. Only that it required witnesses, and that once performed, certain things could not be undone. After that winter, one particular day vanished from the village calendar. No weddings, no funerals, no visits to the church. People stayed indoors. Animals were kept close. Candles remained unlit. When asked later why this was done, no one spoke of fear. They spoke of respect. The kind of respect that only fear can impose. The document was never recovered. The monastery still stands today, but it is no longer permanently inhabited. And in the village, there is one day each year when no candles are lit. Not by order, not by declared fear, but because that is how it is done. In 1872, a priest was quietly removed from his parish in southeastern Europe. No public explanation was given, no sermon addressed the decision, no record described the reason. Officially, nothing had happened, but absence of record is not absence of truth. But in the village, people remembered the months leading up to his removal, and they remembered them clearly. At the time, the church was more than a place of worship. It was authority, order, routine. The priest assigned to the village was young, disciplined, and considered exemplary. He came from a religious family. He followed doctrine closely. He was known for his restraint. There were no complaints, no accusations, no visible conflict. For the villagers, he was exactly what a priest was expected to be, which is why the change went unnoticed at first. The first difference was not dramatic. Services became longer, and no one knew why. Prayers extended late into the evening. Sermons focused less on forgiveness and more on correction. Sin was no longer something to be confessed. It was something to be eliminated. The priests spoke often of purification, of responsibility, of spiritual urgency. Nothing he said directly violated doctrine. Everything could be justified. Still, people began to feel uneasy. Soon, the priest announced additional gatherings, not during the day, not on traditional holy dates. He called people at night, at first in small groups, always after sunset, always at hours when no service had ever been held before. He explained these meetings as necessary, urgent, spiritual in nature. Attendance was not officially required, but refusal was noticed. Those who went said little afterward. Only that the meetings were intense and exhausting. After several weeks, the gatherings changed. The priest no longer called people together. He began calling them individually, always in private, always at night. No announcements were made, no records kept. Each person was told their presence was necessary, personal, important. What was discussed was never shared openly. But the effect was visible. People became quieter, more withdrawn, less willing to speak inside the church. It was a cold night in December, just days before Christmas. The priest sent word for a woman from the village to come to the church after nightfall. She lived alone. She had no close family. The reason given was spiritual necessity, a matter that could not wait. What happened that night was never written down. The woman later said it was not a prayer, and not something she had ever seen before. She did not describe the act itself, only that it did not belong to the church, as she had known it. After that night, the woman was different. She avoided the church. She stopped attending services. She spoke carefully, as if choosing every word. When asked why, she did not explain. She warned others instead. She told them not to answer if they were called at night, not to go alone, not to listen. Her fear was not dramatic. It was controlled, measured, which made it worse. Word spread quickly. People compared experiences. Small details matched. Times, phrases, rules that had never been written. Fear replaced uncertainty. The church no longer felt like a place of refuge. It felt like a place of obligation. No accusations were made publicly. No confrontation occurred. The matter was taken quietly to higher authority. The priest was removed from his position. There was no announcement, no trial, no explanation. He did not return to the village. Officially, the matter ended there. Years later, his name would no longer appear in any accessible church records. There are indications that a report was written, that the events were reviewed. But the document itself no longer exists. Only references to it remain, mentions without content, numbers without pages. The practices stopped. The church returned to normal. But the stories did not disappear. They were passed quietly, without detail, without conclusion. And eventually, the record followed. Some events are not erased. They are simply removed. Years later, the church reopened. Not because the village had grown braver, but because silence eventually becomes unbearable. The doors were repaired. The icons were cleaned. The bell returned to its place, and the clergy approved it. Officially, it was a renewal, a restoration of order. But the village knew something the papers never said out loud. A church can be reopened, a building can be restored, but not everything that happens inside it stays buried. For a long time, there was no priest. Not because the village didn't want one, but because no one wanted the village. To the clergy, it was an inconvenient place, a quiet corner of southeastern Europe where history had stains that wouldn't wash out. But the people kept the church alive in small ways. Candles lit for the dead, prayers whispered behind closed doors, weddings postponed, confessions avoided. Eventually, even the clergy admitted what the village already knew. Without a priest, a church becomes a shell. And a shell becomes a rumor, and a rumor becomes fear. So the clergy promised a solution. A priest would come, a man eager to serve, a man willing to take responsibility for a forgotten parish. The village prepared itself for a stranger. But what returned to them was not a stranger. At first, they didn't recognize him. He was older now. His posture was different, his face calmer. He greeted them politely, soft voice, measured gestures. The clergy's letter was read out loud in front of the church. He had been rehabilitated, forgiven, changed. The village listened the way villagers listen, with their mouths closed and their minds wide open. There were those who stared at the ground, refusing to meet his eyes. There were those who watched him too closely. And there were those who smiled because they wanted to believe. Because belief is easier than suspicion, and hope is easier than memory. The priest spoke simply. He did not mention the past. He did not explain the years of absence. He did not defend himself. He only said he was grateful and ready. And the village, exhausted from emptiness, accepted the answer it had been offered. The first weeks were tense. People came to church like they came to a trial, not to pray, but to watch. They listened for a mistake, a slip, a sign. But the priest gave them none. He worked harder than anyone expected. He repaired what others wouldn't touch. He visited the sick. He spoke gently to widows. He stood in the rain during funerals while preaching. And slowly, the village began to soften. The bell rang again. The choir returned. The church smelled of incense instead of dust. Confession reopened. And that was when the real test began. Because a sermon can be performed, a blessing can be staged. But confession is different. Confession is where people speak into darkness and expect darkness not to answer back. At first, nothing strange happened. People left the confessional relieved, some even smiling. And for a time, the village started to believe the impossible. That the clergy were right. That the old story was over. That the priest who returned was not the priest who left. The change was not sudden. It never is. It began with small fatigue. A moment too long staring at the altar. A pause in speech. A look of irritation when someone asked a harmless question. After services, he would remain in the church after everyone left. Not praying, not cleaning. Just standing, as if listening. Then the nervousness appeared. Not public rage, not violence. Something worse. Containment. Like a man holding a door shut from the inside. Villagers noticed, but dismissed it.
He's exhausted.
He's carrying the whole community.
He's devoted.
And devotion is an easy excuse. The first true incident happened during an evening service. There were fewer people than usual. The light was low. The shadows were deeper. At the end, the priest spoke a final blessing. But his voice did not match his face. It was still quiet, still controlled. Yet the words felt wrong. Not sinful, not obscene. Just foreign. The kind of foreignness that makes the skin tighten. A woman near the front crossed herself twice, fast. A man near the door stepped back without realizing it. For a moment, the priest's breath stopped in the middle of a sentence. Not a pause for emphasis. A pause like someone had taken the words away. The candle flames did not flicker, they leaned. The priest's mouth kept moving, but the rhythm of his voice changed, slightly out of step with his own face. The final blessing sounded familiar, yet shaped wrong, as if it had been learned by listening from the other side of a door. A child in the second row began to cry without understanding why. No one comforted him, not because they didn't care, because they were all listening to the same thing. Then it passed. And then, as quickly as it came, it ended. The priest blinked, cleared his throat, and smiled, a normal smile. The village went home and tried to pretend it didn't happen. But pretending has a cost, and the cost always comes due. Not long after that evening service, she returned. The woman from the past years, the one who had been mentioned in whispers back when the priest first disappeared. The village remembered her. They remembered how she used to sit still during sermons, as if she were hearing something no one else could hear. They remembered the way she stopped speaking to her neighbors. They remembered the look on her face when the priest was removed. Now she began coming again. At first, she sat in the back, head down, hands clasped so tightly her fingers turned pale. But each week, she changed. Not physically, something deeper. She started arriving early and leaving late. She watched the priest the way a person watches a fire. not because it is beautiful, but because it might spread. One day, someone heard her whispering outside the church after service. Not prayers, warnings. The village didn't ask what she meant. Villagers rarely ask questions they are afraid to answer. Instead, they labeled her
mad,
Unstable.
possessed herself.
and that word began to move quietly through the village like smoke. Possessed. The priest continued his work. But now, the air around him felt different. Not heavy, expectant. As if the church itself was waiting for something to happen. Rumors do not stay in one village. They travel the same way prayers travel, from mouth to mouth, from fear to fear. Someone spoke to someone who had a cousin. Someone wrote a letter to someone who used to serve in a nearby parish. And eventually, the story reached a man the church no longer advertised. An old priest. Retired, withdrawn. The kind of man people remembered only when they ran out of options. An exorcist. He had not performed rites in years. He lived quietly, as if he were trying to forget something that refused to be forgotten. When he heard the rumors, he did not react like a superstitious man. He reacted like someone recognizing a pattern. He asked only 2 questions.
How long has it been happening?
And
Did it return or did it arrive?
then he stood up, took his coat, and left. He came without announcement. No dramatic arrival, no entourage, no public confrontation. Just an old man in a worn coat, stepping into a church that had once been abandoned. The priest noticed him immediately. But the exorcist did not imagine things. He walked slowly down the aisle, as if measuring the air. Then he stopped and spoke.
You returned.
I did. The church welcomed me back.
The church or the clergy?
Are they not the same?
Not always.
Why are you here?
To see if the village is safe.
From what?
From what returns wearing a familiar face.
You speak like a man who expects monsters.
I speak like a man who has met them. It seems you didn't come here alone.
What do you mean I didn't come here alone?
The priest's smile stayed on his face, but his eyes did not. That night, the exorcist did not go to the mayor. He did not call the clergy. He did not gather the villagers. He could have, but he didn't. Because fear spreads faster than truth. And because if the village panicked, the thing inside the priest would not hide anymore. It would move. It would choose new places to live. The old exorcist watched the people as they left church. He watched the woman in the back, her face tight with dread. He understood something then. The village had already been infected. Not with disease, with denial. And denial is a doorway. The only way to close it was to face what had stepped through. He chose a night when the church was empty. No audience, no witnesses who would misremember. No villagers to suffer the consequences of hearing something they couldn't unhear. The priest stayed late, as he often did, standing in the center of the church, listening. The exorcist entered without knocking. The priest did not turn around, as if he already knew. The air in the church felt thick. Not like fog, like pressure. The exorcist spoke softly. Not to the priest, to whatever was occupying the priest's silence. What happened next was not like the films. There were no flying objects, no screaming crowds. There was only a man and something inside him that did not belong to him.
I am an exorcist. You are not hidden here.
You think you know what you're looking at.
This man is possessed, and what is in him is not human.
Not human is a simple word for an old fear.
Leave him. You were not invited. You have no home here.
The priest's body did not change, but the room did. The silence bent. The candle flames leaned away from the altar as if avoiding something, and then a sound emerged. Not a scream, a breath. Like something exhaling for the first time in a long time. The priest staggered, hands on the pew, eyes wide, and for a moment he looked human again. By morning, the priest was gone. No farewell, no confession, no explanation. The clergy issued no statement. The village did what villagers do best. Some said he left because he was ashamed. Some said he left because he was threatened. Some said he never left at all, but walked into the forest and vanished. The woman who had been called mad did not speak much after that, but she began sleeping again. And that, more than any rumor, convinced the exorcist he had not been too late. The old man remained, not because he wanted to, because someone had to. The clergy approved it quickly, as if grateful the problem had resolved itself. The village accepted him with a kind of quiet relief. He did not preach grand sermons. He did not demand devotion. He simply restored routine. And yet, every time he locked the church door at night, he did it carefully, as if he knew the truth. A village can rebuild a church. A community can forgive a priest, but forgiveness does not erase what entered. And some things do not leave forever. He listened. Nothing moved inside. He turned the key, once, then again, slower. And as he stepped away, the church bell rope, hanging in the darkness behind the door, shifted slightly, as if something inside had brushed past it.
In the summer of 1790, in a village beneath the Sindro Mountains, the sky was clear. Hay lay drying in long golden rows. Children ran barefoot through dust. The church bell rang for evening prayer. Then, without wind, without warning, without distant thunder, a cloud appeared. Not above the village, not above the valley, above a single field. As if someone had drawn a line across the sky. On one side, sunlight, on the other, hail. And in the middle of it, a man was running. Witnesses would later say the storm followed him. Wherever he ran, the cloud moved, as if it recognized him. And inside the cloud, for a single second, something shifted. long, dark, like a tail cutting through vapor. When the man fell to his knees, someone whispered, "Solomonar." By morning, the storm was gone. The neighboring fields were untouched. But in front of the man's house, a strange thing had appeared. An axe had been driven into the ground, and rainwater from the roof was flowing along its blade. Flowing and flowing, until suddenly, it stopped.
My name is Andre. I am not a soldier. I am not a priest. I am a wandering school teacher. I carry books where others carry knives. I travel from village to village, following stories most people prefer not to follow. Places where people say strange things happen. Places where storms come without wind. Where animals refuse to cross a field. Where old men stop talking when night falls. Some call them superstitions. I call them questions. And I have spent years walking through the mountains, looking for the places where those questions refuse to die. That is how I came to this village. They did not send for me. No one ever does. You hear about a place in a market, or at a roadside fire, or from a man who lowers his voice without knowing why. Storms that strike only one field, hail that falls in sunlight, a man who angered the sky. That was enough. So I went to a village beneath the Sindral Mountains, a place the locals called
Ronchu Chindralului.
When I entered the village, they welcomed me politely. But they were not looking at me. They were looking past me, at the clouds. An old shepherd named Babu offered me bread and a place to sit. He watched the sky for a long time before speaking. Then he said,
In this valley, storms do not arrive by accident.
I asked him what he meant. He did not answer immediately. He broke the bread in two, handed me a piece, and said,
They arrive by account.
I asked him what that meant. He looked at me carefully, as if deciding whether I should hear it. Then he said,
It means the sky remembers.
The man the storm had followed was named Ili. He owned more land than the others, more cattle, more pride. He also had a son. The boy had been born with a caul, a thin membrane over his head and shoulders. The midwives whispered. Some called it blessing, some called it calling. As the boy grew, small folds of skin formed beneath his arms, like unfinished wings. Ili cut them. They grew back. He cut them again. They grew again. The village began to murmur. He is marked. Ili refused to live with a sign he did not understand. One night, he took the boy into the mountains. He left him at the edge of the forest.
Do not return.
He said,
Do not carry my name.
The boy did not cry. He looked up at the sky and walked into the dark. In these mountains, there are stories older than churches. Stories of children born marked. It is said that when such a child is abandoned, he is not alone for long. An old Solomonar, a weather wizard, finds him. Not by accident, by sign. The boy is taken beneath the earth. Into a hidden school, known in whispers as the Solomonary. There, 10 apprentices are gathered. They remain underground for 7 years. They learn every language spoken by living creatures, the speech of wind, the murmur of water beneath stone, the tremor inside clouds before hail forms. They learn charms and curses. They learn how to bind lightning to iron. Above them, suspended by threads, hang millstones. Each apprentice must walk beneath them without flinching. Many turn back. Only one remains. And their teacher, according to the oldest accounts, is the devil himself. After 7 years, only one apprentice is chosen. The others return changed, or do not return at all. The chosen one receives 3 things: an enchanted iron axe, a bridle woven from birch bark, and a book containing the hidden knowledge of storms. Then he is led to water, to an alpine lake that does not change its level, whether rain falls or snow. There, he calls the dragon beneath, and when it rises, he mounts it. He rides into the clouds and directs the hail. Ili's son vanished in 1783. 7 years later, the storms began.
Later that day, Babu offered me a bed to sleep in at the sheepfold. An old woman came to see me that evening. She had been the midwife at the boy's birth. Firelight flickers against the wooden beams of the sheepfold. Outside, the sheep shift quietly in the dark. The old woman sits close to the fire. Her hands are folded over the head of a worn wooden staff. For a while, she says nothing. Babu watches from the shadows. Then she speaks.
I was there.
She looks into the fire.
I was the one who brought that boy into the world.
The flames crackle softly.
At first, there was nothing strange. The birth was long, but clean. The child cried strong lungs.
She nods slightly.
A healthy boy.
Then her expression changes.
But when we washed him, we saw it. A thin skin like a veil.
Babu shifts slightly in the darkness. The old woman continues.
At first we said nothing. Some say such children see things others do not. But Ili did not like what he saw.
The fire pops.
At first he only stared. Then he began asking questions. Too many questions.
She imitates his tone quietly.
Is it normal? Will it stay? Can it be removed?
We told him the truth, that the skin would dry, that it would fall away, that the boy would grow like any other child.
Then she adds quietly.
But Ili had already begun to fear him.
The wind moves softly outside the sheepfold.
And fear is where these stories always begin.
Then she stayed a little longer and left, leaving Babu and me thinking. The day was very long, and I was tired after the hike to the village, so I fell asleep pretty quickly. The next day, Babu said we should leave the village and take a walk to the lake. Babu took me to the lake at dawn. It lay high in the mountains. Wind crossed the ridge, but the water did not move. On one side of the lake stood a tall man reading from a book. On the opposite side stood another. They did not speak to each other. They read. As they read, the center of the lake began to tremble. Not with waves, with depth. A low sound rose from beneath the surface. like something breathing underwater. Babu whispered.
Do not throw a stone.
I did. The sound stopped. The water sank inward. The sky darkened in a single breath. A cloud formed above us. Dense, vertical, almost touching the earth. Inside it, something long shifted. We ran. The hail began before we reached the ridge. It did not fall randomly. It fell where I ran, as if correcting me. The storm did not come the next day, nor the day after. For a while, the sky stayed clear, as if nothing had happened. And that frightened the village more than the hail. Because when the sky stays quiet after a warning, it means the answer has not been given yet. On the fourth evening, the wind stopped. Not slowly, all at once. The trees froze in place, leaves hanging without sound. Even the dogs stopped barking. Babu looked toward the mountains and said only,
It has found him.
A cloud was rising above the ridge, not spreading, climbing, straight up like smoke from a fire no one could see. People stepped out of their houses. No one spoke. The cloud moved across the valley without touching the ground, until it stood above one place. Illy's field. Sunlight covered the rest of the village. Only his land went dark. Then the first stone fell. Not many, just a few. Heavy, slow, as if the sky was testing the distance. Illy ran out of the house shouting. He looked up once, and then he started running. The hail followed him. Not the wind, not the rain, only the hail. Where he ran, it fell. When he crossed the yard turned white. When he reached the road shattered under ice. But the fields beside him stayed green. People backed away, crossing themselves. Someone whispered,
It knows him.
Illy ran toward the barn. The cloud moved. He ran toward the well. The cloud moved. He ran toward the edge of the village. And the storm moved with him, as if tied to his shadow. The sound above us changed. No longer thunder, something deeper, a dragging sound, like something heavy turning inside the clouds. Then the shape appeared. At first, only a darker line inside the storm, long curved, moving against the wind. The cloud opened for a moment, and we saw it. Something like a body, not bird, not snake. Too large for both. Its back rolled through the vapor, and the hail began to fall faster, harder, striking only the ground around Illy. People fell to their knees. Babu grabbed my arm.
Do not look too long,
he whispered. But I could not stop. The cloud split again, and this time we saw him. A man seated on the moving shape. Tall, still. Birch bark, pale against the dark sky. The thing beneath him turned once more, and the sound came again from above the village. Illy stumbled. He fell in the mud in front of his house. He raised his hands and screamed.
I didn't know. I didn't know what he was. I didn't know.
The cloud lowered, not all the way, just enough. The shape descended through the vapor, not touching the ground, hovering. The rider slid down from its back, as if stepping from a stair no one else could see. The air felt heavy, like before lightning. The man stood in front of Illy. His clothes were dark, wet with cloud. He spoke quietly.
Look at me.
Slowly, Ili raised his eyes. The man's face was pale. Older, harder. Ili whispered.
My boy,
You got what you did not understand.
I was afraid.
You threw away what was given.
I didn't know.
You knew enough to send me into the mountain.
The wind began to rise again. The dragon above shifted, restless.
For 7 years, I learned the speech of storm and stone. For 7 years, I walked under the earth where no father follows. And when I came back, you closed the door.
Forgive me. I beg you. Take the field. Take the house. Take everything.
I did not come for your field.
He raised the bridle slightly. The cloud above trembled. Suddenly, a shout broke through the storm. A man ran into the yard, waving his arms, holding a cross tied with straw and cloth. The stone master. He screamed words no one could understand, drawing signs in the air, throwing handfuls of grain into the mud. He struck the ground with his staff again and again. The dragon above roared, a deep tearing sound inside the sky. The Solomonar looked up once. Then he turned back to Ili, as if he wanted to say more. But the air broke. The storm pulled upward. The dragon rose through the cloud, its long body vanishing into white. The Solomonar stepped back, caught the bridle, and in a single motion was lifted with it. Then he was gone. The cloud closed. The hail stopped. Sunlight fell on the yard again. Only Ili's house was broken. And in the mud beside him lay the birch bark bridle. The storm did not return the next day, but the village did not feel safe. When a storm comes once like that, people know it can come again. The man they called the Stone Master did not leave. He stayed in the village, walking from house to house, speaking in a low voice, as if every word carried weight. He told them the Solomonar had not finished. He told them the storm could return any night. And he told them he was the only one who knew how to stop it. At first he asked for simple things. Eggs baked in ash, milk left at the door before sunrise, a candle kept from Easter night, a wreath of wheat hung beside the icon. The villagers gave them without question. But for Ili, it was not enough. The stone master said the storm had chosen him, that the sky had written his name. Ili brought him grain, then silver, then more silver. I saw him one evening counting coins with shaking hands before placing them into the man's bag. How much? I asked Babu.
Enough to buy half the valley,
said the old shepherd. The stone master began to speak louder after that. He stood in the middle of the road and said no Solomonar could cross the mountains while he was there. He said he knew the old words. He said he knew the signs. He said the storm obeyed him now. People believed him. Fear makes men believe many things, but something did not sit right with me. The night the storm came, the stone master had arrived before it. The night the storm stopped, he was the first to claim victory. And every time he spoke of the Solomonar, his eyes did not look at the sky. They looked at Ili. I asked Babu what he thought. He kept watching the mountains, the way he always did, as if waiting for something that might never come. Then he said quietly,
He's no Solomonar.
What is he then?
A man who learned that fear feeds faster than sheep.
He picked up a stone and turned it slowly in his hand.
The real ones don't shout. They don't sell protection. They don't count coins. And the real storm doesn't come for money.
We stood in silence for a while. Down in the yard, Ili was nailing boards over his broken window, his hands trembling so badly He could barely hold the hammer. I asked, "Does he deserve this?" His voice was calm, too calm.
He sent his own blood into the mountain. No father who does that walks under a clear sky for long. And if the boy came back, then the storm came back with him.
Babu looked at me once more, and for the first time since I arrived, there was no fear in his eyes.
Some debts are not paid to men. They are paid to the sky.
For a few days, the sky stayed clear. Too clear. No wind, no thunder. No clouds heavy enough to carry hail. The stone master walked through the village like a man who had already won. He spoke loudly now. He said the Solomon would not return. He said the mountains were closed. He said the storm had been broken. People believed him because they needed to believe something. Only Babu kept looking toward the ridge. Every evening, he sat on the same bench, watching the line where the forest met the sky. On the fifth night, he stopped speaking in the middle of a sentence. His eyes narrowed. The air had changed. Not colder, not warmer, just still. He stood up without a word and grabbed my arm.
"Come,"
he said. "What happened?" I asked.
He came back.
"There's no storm," I said.
There doesn't have to be.
We walked fast through the village. No one else seemed to notice anything. Dogs slept. Windows were dark. Even the stone master's house was quiet. Babu did not stop there. He kept walking toward Ili's house at the edge of the fields. The grass bent in a narrow line, like something had passed through it. Babu froze.
"Too late,"
he whispered. We reached the yard. The door was open. The boards Ili had nailed over the window were broken from the inside. The air smelled of wet earth. Then the sound came. Not thunder, not wind. That deep dragging sound I had heard at the lake. We both looked up. The sky was not covered in clouds. Only a single dark shape moved above the house, slow and heavy, like smoke that had weight. For a moment the shape lowered, and the air grew thick, hard to breathe. And then I saw it, the long body moving through the night. Something vast, turning inside the dark. On its back, a figure. Still, silent, holding the pale birch bridle. Ili was not on the ground. He was not in the yard. He was not in the house. He was hanging from the side of the creature, bound with something that looked like rope, but moved like smoke. His feet dragged in the air. The Solomonar did not look at us. He did not look at the village. He only looked forward, as if following a road no one else could see. The dragon rose slowly, until the dark swallowed both of them. I wanted to run into the village, to wake the others, to tell them what we had seen. Babu grabbed my shoulder hard enough to hurt.
"No, they don't need to know. They'll ask where Ili went. They will say he ran. They will say the mountain took him. And that is better."
I stared at him. Why?
If they hear the truth, they will fear the wrong man. And fear makes people stupid. They will drag the stone master into the road. They will beat him, maybe kill him.
He spat into the grass.
He's a liar, but he's only a man.
The wind moved again, soft this time. Babu's eyes followed the mountains. We stood there for a long time, listening to nothing. After a while, Babu spoke again, almost to himself.
There are powers older than churches, older than kings, older than the names we give them.
He looked at me one last time.
And the ones who forget that
He nodded toward the empty sky.
Do not stay long on this earth.
He wasn't alone on the road. Something was walking beside him. There is a road in Romania that does not exist on any map. It doesn't appear on Google Maps. There are no signs pointing to it. But the locals know it. And they say that if you enter it after sunset, you never come back the same. Some don't come back at all. This is not a famous legend. It's not something you'll find in history books. People don't talk about it openly. They lower their voices. They change the subject. Because this road is not meant to be remembered. It is meant to be avoided. Somewhere in Romania, far from busy roads and city lights, there is a small village surrounded by forests. There is only one old road that cuts through the trees. During the day, it looks harmless, dusty, silent, forgotten. But when night falls, no one uses it. The villagers say the forest listens, and the road remembers. An old man once said only 3 words about that road. Don't go there. No explanation, no story, just fear in his eyes. Because years ago, someone entered that road after dark and never reached home. On a quiet evening, a man decided to take that road. He had used it many times before, during the day. This time was different. The sun was already gone, and the forest was completely still. After a few hundred meters, the silence became unbearable. No wind, no insects, no footsteps except his own. Then his phone lost signal. It didn't turn off. The signal simply disappeared, as if the road didn't exist. He felt watched, not from one direction, but from everywhere. Sometimes he thought he heard footsteps behind him. When he stopped, they stopped. When he walked faster, they followed. The road didn't end. It stretched longer than it should have. He knew this road. He had walked it his entire life. But now it felt endless. When he finally turned around, the road behind him was gone. Only darkness, only trees. And then someone called his name. The voice sounded close, but it was not human. This was only the beginning. Because once the road notices you, it never lets you leave. The road disappeared behind him. The forest stood still. And then the voice called his name. Not shouting, not whispering. Just enough to be heard. He didn't answer. Everyone in the village knew one rule. Never answer a voice you can't see. Especially at night, especially in the forest. But the voice didn't stop. It called his name again. This time softer, almost familiar. As a child, he had heard stories like this. Stories told only after sunset. Stories that ended suddenly when someone walked into the room. They said the forest has voices. Not human. Not animal. Voices that borrow familiar sounds to make you listen. The voice called him again. This time it sounded like someone he knew. Someone from long ago. Someone who shouldn't be there. His heart started beating faster. And without realizing it, he answered,
Yes.
The moment he spoke, the forest changed. The air grew heavy. The trees seemed closer, and the voice stopped pretending. It no longer sounded familiar. It sounded pleased. In the old stories, they said some spirits don't hunt with claws or teeth. They hunt with voices. They don't chase you. They wait for you to answer. Because once you do, they know where you are. And they can follow. He felt movement around him. Not footsteps, not shadow. Something slower, something circling. The voice came closer. Not from one direction, but from all of them. He remembered the old man's words.
Don't go there.
But the warning came too late, because the forest had already answered back. The voice spoke one last time, not calling him, not asking, just say,
"You heard us."
Then Something stepped onto the road.
He didn't answer the voice. In the village, people say that answering is a mistake. Because once you speak back, the forest remembers you. Bend, once it remembers you, it doesn't let you go easily. At first, nothing seemed different. The same dirt road, the same trees, the same silence. But something felt wrong. The road felt narrower, as if it had moved closer while he wasn't looking. In Romanian folklore, there are places that are not cursed, but claimed. Old people say that forests can belong to something. And when you step into such a place, you are no longer a visitor. You are being tested. The trees leaned inward. Branches tangled above him, blocking the sky. The road tightened. What used to be a road became a corridor. And the deeper he walked, the harder it was to breathe. He felt it. Not behind him, not in front of him. Beside him, keeping the same pace. In old stories, they say some spirits don't chase people. They walk next to them, waiting. The voice returned. It sounded familiar, too familiar. Like someone from the village, like someone who knew him well. That's how these things work, according to the old tales. They don't invent voices. They borrow them. There is an unspoken rule in Romanian folklore. If something calls you in the forest, do not answer. If it walks beside you, do not look. Because the moment you look, you admit it exists. And once you admit it, it gets closer. He slowed down. The presence slowed down. He stopped. It stopped. When he tried to turn back, the road behind him was no longer there. Only trees, only darkness. As if the forest had closed behind him. The voice whispered again, closer than before.
You shouldn't have come here.
By, and for the first time, he realized something worse than being followed. He had been allowed to enter. He didn't move. The forest was too quiet for movement. The fog hung heavy between the trees, as if the night itself was holding its breath. He understood something then, not clearly, not fully, but enough to feel it settle deep inside him. This place wasn't reacting to him anymore. It was watching. He started walking again. Slowly, carefully. The road no longer felt like a path. It felt like a boundary. On one side, everything he had known. On the other, something that had been waiting. The fog shifted as he moved, opening just enough to let him pass, then closing again behind him. He could feel it now. Not as fear, not as panic, as certainty. Something was walking beside him, close enough that he could sense its pace, its pauses, its patience. It never touched him. It didn't need to. In the old villages, people speak about things that follow you home. Not spirits that attack, not shadows that jump from the dark, but presences that accompany. They say these things don't take you by force. They walk with you long enough for you to forget what being alone feels like. And once you forget that, you belong to them. He noticed something strange. His footsteps sounded wrong. Not louder. Not softer. Delayed. As if the sound was arriving a moment too late. As if it wasn't coming from his feet at all, but from somewhere beside him. The urge came suddenly. Not fear. Curiosity. A simple thought, just one glance. Just enough to understand. His neck tensed, his breath caught. Every instinct told him the same thing. Don't. Because whatever was beside him was waiting for that moment. The voice spoke again. Not his name, not yet. It spoke calmly, almost gently.
You don't have to be afraid.
The words felt practiced, as if they had been used before. As if others had heard them, right before they stopped walking. Ahead of him, the fog began to thin. Not disappear, just thin, revealing a shape in the distance. Something that looked like an opening, a way forward. The presence slowed, as if giving him space, as if offering him a choice. That's when he understood the truth. The road doesn't end here. It decides. And whatever was walking beside him had already made its choice. The only question left was whether he would make the same one. The road opened, not suddenly, not violently. The trees stepped back, as if allowing passage. The fog thinned. For the first time since entering, he could see farther than a few steps ahead. That was how the forest convinced people. It never forced them to leave. It allowed them to believe they could. People think the forest wants bodies. It doesn't. Bodies rot. They disappear. The forest takes what lasts. Voices, footsteps, memories. That is why some return home, but never speak the same way again. He walked until the trees thinned, until the branches no longer touched, until the road felt ordinary again. But something was missing. The presence did not follow him out. It stayed behind. And that was when he understood the rule. The forest does not leave with you. It leaves something inside you. Something quiet. Something patient, waiting for silence. He reached home before sunrise. The door opened, the lock turned. Everything looked the same, but it felt smaller, as if the walls were listening. He sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his clothes, still holding his breath. The room was silent. Too silent. And for a moment, he felt the same presence beside him. He heard his name. Not from the forest. Not from the road. From inside his own thoughts. And he did not answer. Because some rules follow you home. Some roads do not trap you. They remember you. And if you are ever allowed to leave, it is not because you escaped. It is because the forest decided the price had been paid.